All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Junta City Council. Tonight is June 2nd, 2025. The time is now 6 p.m. If I can have Pastor Lynn with UMC come up to give us our invocation. Brock, can you turn that mic on for us?
Let's pray. Gracious and loving God, thank you for your presence with us today and always. Thank you for bringing each of these individuals here tonight with different thoughts, ideas, but always having the best interests of this community at heart. Grant everyone clarity of thought and unity of purpose. Give us all an extra measure of peace and harmony, working together to find answers to questions and solutions to the challenges we face. In your Son's precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen. If you'll stay standing for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Lynn. Mrs. Schofield, roll call, please.
Ramirez,
Present.
Velasquez,
Present.
Stoker, Ayala,
Here.
Ochoa,
Here.
Pintoya,
Here.
Rickoff.
I'm here.
All right. Minutes of the previous meeting. I entertain a motion.
I motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, I'll ask for your vote. And that passes unanimously. Citizen participation. This is for non-agenda items only. You have 5 minutes. You can come up to the mic, state your name and address for the people watching at home, and you have 5 minutes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry, I had emailed this, but I'm having trouble with my my new email address sending. It states that citizen participation is for non-agenda items only, and I think that's unnecessary. I think it should just be citizen participation. If someone has a question or wants to ask or give information about an agenda item, I think that actually makes more sense than having non-agenda items. And since we don't have a process for citizen participation for agenda items, I think it's odd that that's how we have it on the agenda.
Okay. So that would be more of the way this has been set up for many years. We can definitely look into that, but right now I have to make sure that no one else is for citizen participation, and then we'll go into that a little bit later. Anyone else for citizen participation? All right. So now that nobody came up for citizen participation, we can go over that in our governing body comments. When we have governing body comments, if you guys notice your agenda tonight, there's a place called Community Event Announcements. And what that is going to be for sometimes Mrs. Rickoff here has Otero events. Jeremiah had the fishing derby and stuff for the sometimes senior center. It's even a City of La Junta event. We'll put that there. The governing body comments would be more for what we would like to see on the agenda going forward, maybe things that have been brought up to us by citizens and stuff like that going forward. So when we get to that section, I'd appreciate if you bring that up again, Maureen.
Will do.
Okay. Moving on to community event announcements. If anyone has that, now is the time to let that one be known.
The Brewfest is Friday,
Okay.
and I think it's right here. It's at the Plaza Park. There's on Facebook, there's a code to scan if you want to get tickets.
Oh, Nancy's here. Nancy, do you have all the Brewfest info for us?
I might have some. The Brewfest is Friday, like Lisa said. It's going to be 7 to 11 at the Santa Fe Plaza. Tickets are $25 each. You have to be 21 to enter. There'll be food trucks. There is QR code on the internet where you can purchase tickets in advance, or you can also use that QR code at the gate to purchase tickets. The bands will be Whiskey Throttle and Arkansas Valley Entertainment, and Caitlin Tibbetts will be performing. And everybody always has a good time.
What year is this for you guys?
Pardon?
What year is this for the Brewfest?
Be at least the 7th. Might be the 8th, I don't know. It's a number. I don't know about numbers.
Can someone pay at the gate to?
Yes, you can pay at the gate.
Okay,
yes.
so they wouldn't need to have their phone with the QR code at the gate?
Probably it would be a good idea.
Okay.
I don't know this first time we're doing it that way,
Okay.
because the young people want to do it that way.
Sure, sure.
So we're going to find out how it works.
Okay, looking forward to that. Thank you.
Yeah, so
And all proceeds benefit?
basically it's going to be benefiting the Plaza building. We still need tables and chairs and pots and pans and kitchen utensils and plates, silverware, tablecloths, napkins, all of that stuff. So we still need a lot of money to get it finished and opened.
Good. Well, good luck, Nancy. Thank you for that update.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Any other community event announcements?
Just the Senior Center Advisory Board will be this Thursday at 10 a.m. at the Senior Center. Everybody's welcome.
Awesome. All right, now we have a property fund audit by Mr. Brock Hinkhouse, who is serving double duty tonight.
So we're kind of fairly early on into the process of the property management audit. I met with Michael about 2 weeks ago, and we kind of broke it down into maybe about 3 areas that we'd like to look at. And the first one we started out with is to kind of make sure everybody was in good standing with their leases. If there were any questions about, if everything's kind of on the up and up, and everybody's in good standing, everybody is paid up to date. There was nothing, that looked out of place there. The second part was to look at city properties that were not under leases, and I've already started that. There's probably not as many properties as we think, but there are some, and the idea is to go in there and what are we using them for? What kind of condition are they in? Are they something that we could lease out? And is it something that we don't need to have, or do we need to just get some stuff cleared out of it? And then the third one, and this one will probably take a little while, it's to kind of look into the details of all city leases. The original wording is very similar, but when you get into the amendments, that's where things they all need something different. And there are some leases that they don't ask for a lot from us. They kind of take care of themselves. There are some that use the city to kind of help build their business. So those are kind of 3 areas we're working on. We have a timeline of 30 to 45 days to have this done. I'm hoping we get it done a little sooner.
Any questions for Brock?
Once you guys are done with that, then there will be a list of those properties that are not being leased at this point, so then we can look them over. And
I'm sure the next time I come, I can bring you a lead. I have a list of the leases here. I can kind of off the top of my head tell you there's about 3 buildings out in between the airport and Care Connect. There's the Armor Sheet Metal building. There's a modular out at Prairie View. I think there's a few more, but yeah, there's not a ton of them.
okay, that's good to know. Thank you for that, Brock.
And then, are you guys working on a tour as well?
Yeah. In fact, we've got the beginning process of doing that. So whenever you guys want to go, we'll get the bus ready and we can go. I think if we just do a drive-by tour, we can kind of get it all done probably in one night or day. So
Yeah.
evening, whenever y'all want.
And the building directly across the street, that was it going on 2 years that we purchased?
The old
Photography station or photography studio. We bought that.
Maybe Miss Harris might jump in.
The purchase of that wasn't complete until just a little while ago, and it's not necessarily the purchase was done, but without some of the deed of trust that needed to be foreclosed upon. So the foreclosure that actually made it ours was only recently. We bought the note. We didn't end up with buying it the way that you were, I think, thinking. That we bought the note from the party who had financed it for the party who is deceased, if you're remembering all of that. So we bought the note, and then we foreclosed upon the property, which is a project within deed of trust. Weird noise. Can I just talk?
We were turning it down.
Okay. Anyway, when you foreclose upon a deed of trust, it's the same as foreclosing on a mortgage, but you do it through a different entity. You don't do it through a judicial foreclosure through the court. You instead go through the county treasurer, because Colorado happens to be the only state in the United States that offers this non-judicial foreclosure option through the county treasurer. Each county treasurer is also designated the public trustee.
Okay, because when it was up for sale, or we were seeking to take it over, it seemed like it was a pretty dire, and expediency was the name of the game.
Well, remember, just because we own it doesn't mean that we have the funding to do the next steps. The next steps after owning a difficult property would be maybe to knock it down, but we don't necessarily have the funding to do that. Generally, the first step in becoming the owner of the property, it happens through usually a foreclosure one way or another. But if we foreclose first to own the property and then need to knock it down, it's different than what you may be familiar with from the last couple of years, where you didn't necessarily own the property. First you condemned it, then you knocked it down using different funds that were available through grants. And then the final stage in those cases becomes owning the property by reducing the cost of that knockdown to a judgment and foreclosing on the judgment. So that's the piece that we're doing with a couple of properties that you may be familiar with, but it's the opposite with the former Bradfield Photography Building.
Okay, and that's going to be my follow-up question: how many properties do we have in the state of business right now? Is it 2?
Are those falling under property management the same way as?
They don't really fall under, I know, the only reason I know is because we're having to clear weeds out from those properties. Is there like 5?
Maybe.
5, I think, not including this one.
And just so we can clarify that too, the reason we started getting those was because there was an EPA program that the city used to utilize in order to take those down with the asbestos removal. That was not, a charge, but then we'd get the land after, and then we'd sell the lots. That program is no longer being used. Am I correct?
As far as I know
Right, Martin?
Yeah, Martin's here this evening.
But now, if we have them as a city, we have a better chance at qualifying for grants that would still do the same thing, except they're not guaranteed like they used to be. So I think the end goal is still to knock those properties down, but we need the funds now, whereas we used to have access to EPA funds that we no longer have access to.
And in addition to that, according to my last conversation with Martin, we actually have to own them in order to get that next set of grants. It's not like the
Not like it used to be.
condemnation.
Yep.
I apologize to Brock, I didn't mean that. I must stick to his time. So.
No, I think that's where, a lot of us kind of got misled on that. And I think the Bradfield one we were trying to get before the EPA money went away, and it just didn't go through in time. If I remember right, with Mr. Klein, but that's a whole other topic. So, all right. Any other questions for Brock while we got him right here with that hat on? No. All right. Mr. Martin Montoya, weatherman Martin Montoya. He's been watching the sky for rain with his Conley Road project. He's going to give us an update on.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to kind of speak a little bit to the property across the street. So we do have a grant called the Brownfield Grant, and it's more for planning, city planning. But we can use this to do asbestos checks, so currently that property is under the Brownfield Grant. So we're going to do I think it already may be done, an asbestos assessment but that's as far as we can take that grant. I do have Ayers who is overseeing our brownfield grant. They're going to look for money to see through the state to see if we can get funding to have an abatement done and then also demolition. So we're in the process of working on that with Ayers, who is doing the brownfield grant. They also happen to think that they may be able to get another EPA grant similar to, it wasn't a grant what we had before, but they're thinking that they can possibly get an EPA grant that would allow us to do a lot more demolition of blight properties. But like the city attorney said, we would have to own those properties before we can do anything with them. So there is a process in place and we are working on it. So I'm going to talk tonight about Conley Road and a few other projects that we have going on. Right now we are currently working on Conley Road. That started today. We are hoping that it'll take about a week. Today the county came in and they milled off all of the asphalt. It was about 6 inches thick, milled it all off, and then we don't have the privilege of having a milling machine that puts the milling straight into a truck, so we have to pick it all up, put it in trucks, and then ship it out. So we are currently working on that right now. Our next project after that is going to be 6th Street, right across from the municipal building and across from the library. We hope to start that project next week and finish it next week as well, weather permitting. And then our next project after that is going to be the paving of 2nd Street in front of the jail between Cimarron and Smithland. And we've already started that project. We kind of have it somewhat ready to be paved. We just need a few more steps there and then it'll be ready for pavement. So we're hoping this whole month we're going to be doing quite a few paving projects. Does anyone have any questions about any of those?
We've said it before, but I want you to tell the people again what's going on with asphalt this year versus asphalt in previous years.
Okay. So we used to work through a business called All Right, who has been here forever. They sold out to another company called United Companies. When they came in, they said they would no longer do the Thursday deal that we had with them. In other words, every Thursday we could get asphalt regardless of the quantity, whether it was 5 tons or 20 tons. But since the new company came in and said they will no longer honor that, so we can no longer order any small amounts unless another project is being done that is over. They have to have at least a minimum of 60 tons before they will run asphalt. So we have to just be ready when other people are ready to do projects, and we're kind of at their mercy at this point.
What is the average size of a city project?
So if we're not doing like the projects we're doing on Conley, when we are doing just patching for the most part, we generally, it'll take 5 to 10 tons for our normal patching projects. Connolly Road is going to take about 500 tons. So just kind of and we're only going from the highway to Rogers Road, which is 236 feet. So, and we are doing a 6-inch lift versus a 4-inch lift. Generally, like our normal streets take 4 inches, but we're going to hit that intersection or that area with the 6-inch lift to just make sure that it's a little bit stouter than our normal street.
More traffic.
Right.
Cimarron and the Smithland streets, did you mention what is it first to?
It's on 2nd Street, right in front of the jail,
Oh, okay.
between Cimarron and Smithland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because
So-
there's a really, really bad pothole around. I think it'll hit your car hard if you get on it. It's like in the Cimarron block.
Okay.
You want to tell them how they can report potholes, or there's 2 options?
No, that's okay. I was voluntold that I had to get a form on the website for people, and it was a really good idea. I have to admit, there is a form on our website under the Streets Department that would allow you to fill out a pothole request to be fixed. Once that's done, it goes straight to Marilyn, who is the receptionist or the secretary, the office manager for the engineering department. She then puts that request into a work order that is then sent to the streets department. And so we are not only are we able to track those year to year now, we are also able to know about them immediately and respond immediately.
I'll get that in.
So,
Do I need to take a picture?
no,
Okay.
no, just
I was
get
glad
on
you
there and
faxed
fill out an
it.
address or location, and we can definitely service those.
What about 10th Street?
Oh, yes. So 10th Street, we had the flood that happened, was it last year? Last July. And so when that happened, that took out asphalt, it took out sidewalks, it took out a lot of Brock's hard work in making that area look nice. Since then, the city department had, well, obviously TLM went back in and fixed the bridge and all the sidewalk that was attached to the bridge. They fixed all of that. The city and the streets department went in and did asphalt, thanks to Conservation Trust money. Did the sidewalk from 10th and Barnes over to the bridge, over to the Arroyo. So that was money provided by the city through Conservation Trust, which is lottery money. So we did that. Well, so the only thing left for us to do now at this point is to, and we've already started working on it, we just haven't gotten to have the time to finish it up. Hopefully that's something else we can do this month, maybe the last week of this month. But we'll go through and pave, cut out 2 sections on either side of the street, and then fix those, pave those. We're going to bring the asphalt up to the sidewalk, so that way if it does flood again, that the water doesn't undermine the sidewalk as it'll hopefully just go over the street and the sidewalk and come out the other end without doing too much damage to the existing infrastructure.
Martin, I have a question concerning equipment. Do we have everything we need to do these jobs, or how's that going?
No. No, but so for instance, when I first started here, we were hiring third-party companies to do our asphalt, to do our paving. Therefore, we don't have a paver. Rick did allow me to buy a roller, a highway class roller, which we use to do our streets with. And I think eventually our next step was to get a paver. I did talk to Michael about that. He did seem receptive, so I'm hoping that that's something I might be able to get into next year's budget. We'll see. Those things are kind of expensive, but I don't need a new one. A decent used one that we can work on and work with, it would be ideal. So I really, on top of my list is a paver. But, the guys are starting to do their own concrete work. So we could use money for forms. We could use, we have purchased a few things since I started here. We purchased a crack sealing machine. We purchased a tack oil machine, which is what we use to spray the road with before we put asphalt onto it to make sure it adheres to whatever we're putting it on. But there are still a few pieces of equipment that we need in order to be a full-fledged street department.
You want to talk about a chip seal and where we're at with that?
So in the life of a street, technically you build a street, hopefully it lasts 20, 30, 40 years. After that, if the road is good enough, if you have the right equipment, you can do a 2-inch overlay. If you have a milling machine, which we don't, the milling machines are really expensive. So they cost about $30,000 a month to rent. But if you can do a 2-inch overlay, if you have a milling machine, you can cut out 2 inches off the top and then overlay it. And then your next step in that life would then be chip seal. And then hopefully your 2-inch overlay should last you another good 20, 25 years. And then you put chips on that, and that may last you another 5 years if you're lucky. But really, if you look around town and you see a lot of potholes, a lot of those are due to chip seal just simply coming off. So like your big potholes, like if it's a foot deep, that's not chip seal problem. But you see like a lot of pieces coming off the top, those are your chip seal problems. And it's hard to fix those because they're usually generally less than an inch, inch and a half thick or deep. So it's hard to put asphalt into them and get it to stick and stay there. So sometimes if there's a lot of chip seal coming up, we have to cut sections out and then redo the asphalt in those sections.
But due to the overuse, I would say, of chip seal in the previous years, that's what we're facing right now when it comes to potholes, is a lot of chip seal problems. So we're going to go forward in a different direction going forward to not have as many problems as we're seeing now, correct?
Yes, so really I'm trying to get more money for the budget so that we can rebuild a lot of these roads that are in really bad condition. But we will still try to use, if we can do overlaying, I doubt that's probably going to really be the case, but we will still try to chip seal some stuff, but it's not going to be as much as we've been doing. We should be spending most of that budget on rebuilding roads and then chip sealing little stuff here and there. But it will always probably be a part of what we're doing. I just hope that it's not
The main.
something, it's not the only thing we're doing in order to keep our streets up.
Just so we're all aware of that when budget time comes around. All right. Any other questions for Martin? He will be back up later, just so you guys know. Thank you, Martin. All right. Moving on. Mrs. Harris.
This always makes it feel so exciting. This is a second reading of an ordinance amending section 1012.080 of the Lahana Municipal Code to align with the amended enforcement timeline for the junk vehicle violations. You all might remember that that's a bunch of long words to explain that we're changing this so that we gave citations at the same time that we were allowed to tow, instead of being allowed to tow within 72 hours, but then having 15 days to wait before you could give a citation.
All right. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I have a question, and we talked about this a little bit last time, but just to clarify, there was never a situation where somebody's car was towed before they were issued a citation, correct? While we were in this like sort of limbo of having two different time frames, that never happened.
I don't think that you can say that. I don't know that I know the answer, but I certainly can't say that no, it never happened, because that would imply that there'd been no cars towed since March of 24, which is when they adopted the 72-hour rule.
Okay.
And there may have been a time when a vehicle determined to be a junk vehicle was left on the main travel portion of the roadway, blocking somebody's driveway access or an alley that they would have to tow right away, just so other people could have access.
Outside of this ordinance.
Right. And then this new change has nothing to do with that situation.
Nothing, no.
Okay.
Any other discussion? If not, I'll ask for your vote. And that passes unanimously. Mrs. Harris.
All right, next, an ordinance amending Chapter 8.08 of the Lahana Municipal Code concerning weeds, rubbish, and litter to clarify definitions. And if you'll remember, this specifically was to clarify the definition of weed.
Noxious.
Yes, of noxious weeds.
All right, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, I'll ask for your vote. And that passes unanimously. And just real quick on this one, I did say the last meeting that we would go over what the weed process is from the moment you get a ticket. I'm actually going to have Cassie come in and do that with us, so that way it's not just me explaining it, it's someone that's actually on the front lines there doing it, and she can walk you through what happens when you go to court, if you get it cleared up before then, and all that process. So hopefully at the next meeting we can have Cassie come and explain that side of it for us. And maybe Code Michael as well too. So. Moving on, new business. Mr. Hancock and Mr. Fraze, it is your time to shine. Oh, and just so everyone's aware, they're going to be going over the audit presentation You can find this audit online if you go to the City of Ohana website and you go into the Finance tab. It'll be the 2024 audit. We're reviewing it in 25, but it's the 2024 audit that you're going to be looking for under the Finance tab. It is a lot of pages, so we didn't print them all. So there's a couple that have a book, and then a lot of us are following along on our devices.
All right, well, thank you for the opportunity to present the audit to you this evening. And also would like to thank Elisa and her staff. We're here for 2 weeks during the fieldwork portion of the audit, and Elisa and her staff were always very helpful in providing the information that we need in answering the questions to get the audit completed. So before I go over the financial statements, I want to address the independent auditor's report, which is on page 1, and it's the page right after the table of contents. And there's 2 paragraphs I'd like to address. First is the opinion paragraph, and then our responsibility as auditors. So the opinion that we've rendered is an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. That means that the financial statements present fairly the respective financial position of the city as of December 31st, 2024. The next paragraph is our responsibility as an auditor. And I think I'd spend just a little bit of time here explaining what's involved in the audit and what we're required to do in staying in accordance with the auditing standards that we're required to follow. So we're required to meet 2 objectives. The first objective is to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements that you have in front of you are free of a material misstatement. The second objective is that the financial statements are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So we must meet these objectives, as I mentioned, to render opinion that the financial statements present fairly the respective financial position of the city. So as we perform audit procedures, we gather audit evidence to support our opinion, and those audit procedures include inquiry, observation, analytics, and substantive procedures, which is tracing to source documents. And then we go through all the funds of the city, and then we propose adjusting journal entries, which are recorded to the accounting system in order for the financial statements to be free of a material misstatement and to present fairly the position of the city. So the city has 9 governmental funds and 5 enterprise funds. The governmental funds, which comprise the general fund, and then 6 special revenue funds, which is your conservation trust, economic development, urban renewal, Ohana capital, moving violation, and lodging tax, and then 2 permanent funds, which is your library and cemetery endowment fund. So these funds are accounted for using a modified accrual basis, which means that long-term liabilities and long-term assets are not going to be presented in those financial statements. And then the enterprise funds, which is your electric, water, sewer, sanitation, and property management, are accounted for using full accrual. So you will see long-term assets and long-term liabilities presented in those statements. So I would strongly recommend that you read through the management discussion analysis, which is at the beginning of your audited financials. This gives you a very good explanation of the funds of the city and the purpose that they serve. So I'm going to cover the general fund and the property management fund, and then Andrew is going to come up and finish by giving you a brief overview of the remaining enterprise funds. So if you please turn to page 54, the balance sheet for the general fund is presented. And it's a comparative balance sheet. So we have year-end December 31st, 2024 and 23. So the general fund finished the year with total assets of $4.8 million, which is an increase from the prior year of $1.5 million. And that increase is primarily in the cash and investments and sales tax receivable. The cash and investments increased by approximately $1.5 million from the prior year. So even though you had a significant increase in your cash position, essentially what you're doing is replenishing cash reserves that have been depleted over the past several years. And that's just due to expenditures increasing year after year. And before the increase in the sales tax, your tax revenue base remained constant. So it's very important that you have adequate reserves in order to, as Martin was saying, in order to replace assets when they need to be replaced, you need to have adequate reserves. So historically, the general fund, going back the past 10 years, if you exclude the last several, have had cash reserves from up to $4 to $5 million. The Office of the State Auditor, they do publish some benchmarks to give you an indication what they suggest to be minimum cash reserves. And what they suggest is to have 2 months of expenditures at a minimum in your cash reserves, which would be approximately about $2 million. In the liability section, total liabilities of $254,000. And then the fund balance at year end was $4.4 million, which was an increase of $1.7 million from 2023. And how that increase is derived is on the next page, on page 55, which is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. So the general fund had total revenues in 2024 of $12.8 million, which is an increase of $2.1 million. And that increase was in your tax revenues. Your sales tax went from $5.2 million in 23 to $7.1 million in 24. So your expenditures for the year were just over $11 million, which was comparable to the prior year. It was actually a decrease of about $73,000. So after your other financing sources, the general fund had revenue over expenditures of $1.7 million for 2024. Any questions on the general fund? Okay, next, if you would please turn to page 91. It's the balance sheet for the property management fund. And before I get into the numbers on the balance sheet, we did make a couple recommendations to help improve the internal controls regarding the tracking and processing of rental payments, which Elisa has already implemented. And then also the recommendation that all lease agreements are kept in a secure, centralized location, which I think has already taken place. So property management fund had total assets of $13.6 million at year end, which is an increase of $1.3 million. And that's broken down into current assets, non-current assets, and property and equipment. So current assets did decrease by $1.3 million, which is offset by the increase in the non-current and property and equipment. And the decrease in current assets was due to your decrease in cash and investments. And that was due to the cash outflow that occurred for the improvements at a building out at the industrial park. Non-current assets, which are lease receivables. So a couple of years ago, there was a new governmental accounting standard that went into effect that requires the lessor, which is the city of Lahana, to recognize a lease receivable for the expected future lease payments and a deferred inflow of resources to represent the timing of when the revenue will be recognized. So a year in, that lease receivable, again, which is just your expected future lease payments, was $3.2 million. And that was an increase of $1.8 million from the prior year. And that was due to the new contractor lease agreement with the improvements that I just mentioned out at the building out at the industrial park. That was also the same reason for the increase in property equipment of $1.3 million, which was added to the depreciation schedule, and it will be depreciated over its estimated useful life. Total liabilities was $1.3 million, which was a decrease of $187,000, and that's comprised mainly of unearned lease revenues, and that's broken down into a current portion and non-current portion. And what that represents is the tenant's contribution towards construction or improvements on city-owned buildings. So when that initial contribution is made, we recognize the liability, and then it's amortized into revenue each year over the estimated useful life of that asset. So the net position was $8.7 million at year end, which is an increase of just $91,000 compared to the prior year. And that's derived on the next page, page 92, which is the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. So in 2024, the operating revenues for property management were just under $1.3 million, which was an increase of about $300,000 from the prior year. And again, that's just due to the new lease agreements that were executed and put in place in 24 due to the improvements mainly on that building at the industrial park. Operating expenses decreased. They were $1.4 million by just over $200,000. And most of that decrease is pertaining to the decrease in repairs and maintenance that occurred in 23 versus 24. So even with that decrease in operating expenses, the property management fund had an operating loss of $138,000 before non-operating revenues. The biggest component of your non-operating revenues is your interest revenue, $198,000. And that's broken down to $134,000, which is the interest factor that's associated with the future lease payments or the lease receivables I mentioned on the balance sheet. And then $64,000, which was earned from your investments. So after your non-operating revenues and your other financing sources, the property management fund had a change in net position of $91,000, which you can see was an improvement from the prior year. And then finally, the next page, which is your statement of cash flows, and this gives you an indication of the cash that flowed into the fund and the cash that flowed out. And that's broken down into operating activities, non-capital and capital financing activities, and investing activities. And about the middle of the page, you can see the net change in cash for the year, which had a positive net change in cash of just under $53,000, compared to the prior year, which had a deficit change in cash of $278,000. So that's definitely an improvement from the prior year. Are there any questions on the property management fund?
Have you been working, did you help with this at all? No?
No.
Okay. So next year you'll get to meet with Brock on property management stuff with questions. It was Bill's last year doing this side of it then?
Yeah, he was just finishing up when we were here.
Okay.
So next, Andrew's going to come up and talk about the remaining enterprise funds.
Good evening. Like Patrick said, I'm going to go over the enterprise funds, and we're going to actually start with the electric fund. So we're going to turn back to page 75. So if you go to page 75, that's where we're going to start. And once again, it's a comparative balance sheet. That way we have fiscal year 24, and we can compare it to fiscal year 23. So on the electric fund, the balance sheet did have, just make sure everybody's there. It did have total assets of $11,402,543. It's a slight decrease, or a decrease from the prior year of about $38,000. The total liabilities for electric fund was $1,051,640. And once again, it's a decrease of about $33,000. If you look, there wasn't too much change from 23 to 24 in the electric fund as far as the assets and liabilities. The one thing that I would highlight, though, on the asset side is that your cash and cash equivalents, as well as the investments in total, if you add those two top line items, it did increase by $422,000. So that's good to see that once, like Patrick said, you're putting money away in your reserves for any impaired assets or any kind of fixed assets that need to be replaced. The net position was $10,350,903, and it's a decrease of about $5,000. And that we will see on the next page. So on page 76, here you'll have the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. Operating revenues for the electric fund, $12,417. That's up $300,000 from the prior year. Big reason for that is just the increase in consumption. Operating expenses, $12,242,861. That also increased $733,000. And if you have an increase in consumption, you're also going to have an increase in what you pay ARPA. So some of the big reasons for that increase in the total operating expenses was to pay ARPA for about approximately $322,000. So of that $733,000 increase in operating expenses, $322 relate to ARPA, and then $246 remain. The increase relates to an increase in the parts, supplies, and meters that were used in the fiscal year 24 compared to fiscal year 23. In other words, inventory that was used. Total non-operating revenues was $237,000, which then gives you that change in net position of a negative $4,521. Sorry. So on the electric fund, you can see that it did take a step back from 2023. In 2023, it was $320,000. This year, it's that deficit of $4,521. As we go through these next enterprise funds, it's very important, and I'm going to highlight this on all of them, is that you're able to, total operating revenues need to cover your operating expenses. So in this case, you weren't able to fully fund depreciation. Now, even though your cash went up, you still had a net loss. So there's two things that you really need to look at. One is your cash balance. Are we building up reserves? And two, are we continually having a positive change in net position which is just putting money back into the reserves as well. Does it always correlate dollar to dollar? Absolutely not. There's a lot of, when you're on full accrual accounting, there's a lot of things that factor into that. And that is why we have the cash flow statement on the next page, which kind of shows you that cash inflow and cash outflow. So on page 77, here's the statement of cash flow for the electric utility fund. In the middle of the page there, you'll see a net change in cash and cash equivalents towards the bottom middle. It was a negative $361,000. I will say that part of that reason for the decrease is that some of the cash did get moved over into investments. So if you look up right above it, you did purchase some investments. So some of the money was moved out of this cash account into a higher yielding investment account to try to earn interest. But the other big reason is that acquisition of capital assets of $320,000. So that's the electric fund. Any questions on the electric fund? If not, we're going to go to page 79, and this is the water utility fund. So we'll look at the balance sheet for the water utility fund on page 79. Here, total assets was $14,123,328. So it did increase $697,000 from the prior year. A big reason for that increase is up in that first two line items, that cash and cash or equivalents as well as investments. Both of those increased almost approximately $675,000. So once again, good sign. That shows the fiscal health of this fund is improving and getting better, because at one point it did have a negative pooled cash balance and it had to borrow cash from another fund to help pay for its operating expenses. And now, we'll see it on the next page, due to some rate increases, you guys are making progress on building those reserves back up, and you're able to cover operating revenues, are able to cover operating expenses.
Just real quick, this is the JK rate increase that he's talking about. For those of you that are trying to put it together, that's what he's talking about when we talked about changing course there and getting a little bit healthier on this.
Correct. And you'll see it in the sewer fund too when we get there, but the sewer fund is still lagging a little bit behind, but we'll get there.
And how long ago was that, whenever it was in the...
The first one rate increase was 7/1/2023, and then there was another rate increase 7/1/2024. And I don't know if there was
January.
There was another one January 1st of this year, then 2025. Yeah.
And Andrew, there is still an outstanding loan between water and internal services, correct?
Yes. So one thing that you will look at when I said that they were making progress on paying it back, you're paying back on that borrowing, I should say, just as Elisa said. So if you look under the non-current liabilities, that borrowing to other funds, it's at $445,000, and so you are making payments now on that. And one thing that I'll show you on this next page is
I just had one
the
more
fund
question.
rate. Go ahead.
So on this one, you said, I guess I just didn't ask my question correctly, is you said that in the past years, they had been in a negative. Do you know when that was?
Yes, so that was back in 2022. It's actually right here on this sheet. So on the water fund, it was in 2023 had an operating loss. In 2022 had an operating loss. In 2021, it was about $59,000. And we look at the operating loss. In other words, we always look at the operating revenues covering those operating expenses. And then if you look at your cash balance, the unrestricted cash balance as well was $54,000. It did jump up in 2022 due to some COVID money that was received and not yet spent, and then it dropped back down in 2023. So 2023 was still a little slow, I guess I'll say that, because the rate increases haven't taken full effect, because of that first one being in July 1st, 2023. So it was only a half a year. And now that we're down a full year in 2024, plus the additional raises based on that rate steady, I think it's going to put the water fund back in a position where it needs to be.
Okay, thank you.
So total liabilities, we'll look down there. I kind of got ahead of myself, I apologize. So total liabilities was $1,615,845. That is an increase of $176,000 from the prior year. And a big reason for that is the SCADA agreement that was entered into in fiscal year 24. And the offset of that was that you had some equipment and that was added to the property and equipment above in the asset section. Total net position was $12,507,483. One thing I'll say here is that if you look, most of that is tied up in your net investment in capital assets. So in other words, it's not very liquid and easier to move into cash if you had to need that cash resource. So the $521,000 increase is reflected on the next page. On page 80 now, we have the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. Total operating revenues at the top, $3,535,966. That is an increase of about $561,000. And as I mentioned, it was because one, there was an increase in consumption use, but also and mainly because of the rate increase that was effective 7/1/23 as well as 7/1/24. So you only had a half a year in 23 at that rate increase, then you had another half a year in 24 plus an additional increase at the end of 24. Operating expenses, $3,127,348. It's a decrease of about $210,000, and that decrease is reflected in the decrease in chemical usage as well as the decrease in the supplies, parts, and maintenance or meters that was used in 2024 versus 2023. Non-operating revenues and expenses was $74,912. After you factor in the capital contributions there, you get a change in net position of the $520,720. One thing I'll say as I go through the water and sewer is I'm going to reference you to Note 8. Note 8 is the long-term debt note, and just maybe make note of that because that's where you're going to get all the details for these notes. The water fund had one note with CWR-PDA and then one borrowing to another internal service fund. But when we get to the sewer fund, you're going to see that it had a few more notes, higher principal payments, higher interest payments, stuff that we're going to need to look at when we get there. The statement of cash flow is on the next page, page 81. So it did have a net change in cash equivalents of $263,000. So that's a good thing to see there. So that's even after paying on the note as well as the borrowing to the other internal service fund. Now we will look at the sewer fund. So on the sewer fund, we'll start on page 83. Total assets for the sewer fund was $20,986,234. It's a decrease of approximately $192,000. That decrease is reflected mainly in property and equipment, and it's due to just your depreciation expense on those assets. And then you only had a few additions, which the one big one was the SCADA lease agreement. So there was a SCADA lease agreement both in the sewer fund and the water fund. Very similar, but pertain to each fund separately. Total liabilities, $13,754,608. That's a decrease of $147,000. The decrease here relates to the payments made on the long-term debt, which is your loans payable. You have, like I mentioned before, you have 3 loans with CWR-PDA. They are more detail on Note 8. So if you go to Note 8 to the financial statements, you'll get more detail on that. And then you have an increase because of the lease payable for the SCADA agreement. There's also an increase in that due to other fund. So it went from, if you look in the current liabilities there, you have accounts payable, accrued interest, and then that due to other fund. It went from $100,000 to $285,000. So what happened was in 2023 there was that negative pooled cash, which is why you had 0 cash up above. And then in 2024, same thing happened. We had to borrow money or borrow funds from another fund, which was internal service fund, to help pay for the operating expenses. Now, we record it as a due to other fund until it cannot be paid back within a year. And it sounds like it cannot be paid back within a year, so there will be another long-term borrowing set up between the internal service fund and the sewer fund to help pay that back. One thing to keep in mind, let's continue on here real quick. Total net position is $7,231,626. So that's at the bottom of the page, and it's a decrease of about $45,000. So now let's look at this sewer utility fund statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. So page 84 now. Here at the top, you can see, yes.
Before you go forward, can you point out cash and equivalent on the assets so that they understand that there is no cash and there is no investment?
So
It's
what she's
$30.
referring to there is that there was such a negative pooled cash. In other words, you guys operate your pooled cash system where all the funds take a piece of the pie. And in this case, the sewer fund overate its piece, and so it has to owe it back to the funds that it took it from. Now, you did have investments sitting in the sewer fund, but those investments then were used to help between the due to other fund increase, in other words, paying back to the other funds, plus the investments, that brought your cash account pretty much to zero. $30, which is zero, let's be honest. So really that's what the cash equivalents, that's why it's at zero. So there really is no cash available right now until, one, those rate increases take into effect and you start seeing that increase in those operating revenues, which is hopefully on the next page here, back on 84, those charges for services, that rate increase on 7/123, 7/124, and then as well as on 1/125, according to the rate study that was performed. Now this is something that was done not by us, this was done by an outside company, consulting company. They're the ones that came in and recommended it. We said that you needed it done, but then they're the ones that came in and gave you the exact percentages that they recommended. So now you can see that your operating revenues did go up from last year, about $168,000. Your operating expenses, they went up too, but not as much, $66,000. The big increase on the operating expenses that got offset elsewhere was sludge disposal. It was an increase of $130,000. I think that is something that's been discussed as well, and I think that there is some sort of plan in place right now to hopefully lower that. Talking with Tom, it sounds like that machine hopefully will be up and running sooner than later, but he wasn't quite sure last I talked to him. So if you can control the operating expenses, bring them down, you can keep those operating revenues coming back up, then you'll be able to do a couple things here. One, your depreciation expense is $601,000, so you were able to fund depreciation expense in 2024. However, you look at interest expense was $204,000. Like I mentioned, you have those three notes, CWRPDA plus the borrowing that's going to occur. That means there's a lot of cash outflows. If you look at note 8, it will give you an idea of those cash outflows for each years. From 20, it goes individual years for the first 5 years, and then it puts it into 5-year increments after that. I'll just tell you, the principal payments most are going to be around $150,000 each year. That's just principal. Your interest payments are probably going to be close to what it is, $200,000, and then it'll slightly decrease as the principal goes up, interest goes down. So this fund needs to be able to, one, the operating revenues do cover operating expenses. We always recommend that it covers depreciation expense, and then two, it needs to have the cash flow to be able to pay off the debt. And that debt, as all of you should know, it relates to that wastewater sewer facility. It was not a cheap project, and when you went and got those loans, you're required to pay them back. On the next page, well, any questions on this? We kind of went over a lot.
I don't know about questions, but I want to just be clear, and I want to be a lot quicker than Mr. Seba here. When you talk about SCADA, some people say SCADA. It stands for, and I hope I got this right, Supervisory Control Data Acquisition, if I'm correct on that. And it's basically the brain of our water system. So it controls pumps, valves on a central computer system. And those usually last anywhere from 5 to 10 years, and this one had went way over that. So we were forced at that time to do that upgrade to both water and wastewater, which also came at quite the cost as well too. So just for people saying, well, why did they have that increase? That was what was going on with the SCADA system at that time. So I just want that to be clear too. And then the second thing, when we talk about the JK study, and you've seen one in July, and then one in January, the JK study said we actually should have started a lot earlier. So in order to make it right, we started this year in January to try and catch up to where we should have been originally. So that's why there's the change in the dates there. But other than that, you're doing a great job, so keep going.
No, very well said. once again, the change in net possession, it is a deficit of 45,000. Is it as bad as last year? No. But just make sure that you're moving in that right direction. The cash flow statement on the next page, if you look at some of the things that stick out to me, your net change in cash and cash equivalents, like I said, $30. Really zero. But the big payments, if you look at the cash flows from capital-related financing activities, kind of right there in the middle, you have the acquisition of capital assets of $433,000, and then the lease proceeds offset that because it was funded, it wasn't paid out of cash. And then the principal paid on loans, $768,000. That's just for that 1 year. Interest paid, $209,000 just for that 1 year. So even though as you move forward, you might see the change in net position being positive, you still got to monitor it because your cash flow balance still might be decreasing because just because you have a positive 100,000, does that mean you're having the funds available or the cash available reserves to pay off this debt? So keep that in mind. Any other questions on the sewer utility fund? If there are none, we're going to look at the last fund here real quick, and that's the sanitation utility fund on page 87. So on the sanitation utility fund, total assets was $1,922,515. It's an increase of about approximately $63,000 from the prior year. Most of that increase is in your fixed asset purchases. There was two 2025 Freightliner trucks that were purchased, and then 2 of them were sold as well. So you had an increase because the cost of those new trucks were more than the disposals of the old trucks. Total liabilities towards the bottom, $425,618. That's an increase of $21,000. The big increase there is in your increase in your closure and post-closure cost. Annually, Oakley, which is the landfill, is required to have. We look at the 5-year cost estimate that is performed, and then if it falls 5 years ago, each year after that, until the next 5 years, it's adjusted for inflation as well as adjusted for any actual closure cost. This year, at Oakley, the liability increased due to inflation. So that then gets passed on to all the entities that are involved in Oakley, which is the city of Lahana. Total net position, $1,496,897, so an increase of $41,000. Which we will see now on page 88. Excuse me. Page 88, total operating revenues at the top, $1,284,532, which is an increase of $102,000. That increase is due to the rate increase. As simple as that. The total operating expenses, $1,354,000. It's an increase of $123,000. That increase is reflected into the salaries and benefits. There's an increase there, as well as an increase in the motor pool maintenance. That gives you operating loss of $69,000. Once again, you weren't able to fund depreciation expense. So once again, this is another fund that you need to look at and make sure that your operating revenues are able to cover your operating expenses. Excuse me.
Andrew, they just had a rate increase effective July 1.
Perfect. So there was that rate increase, so that's good to know. Non-operating revenues, $136,000. You had interest income of $62,000. The gain loss is on the sale of those 2 trucks that I mentioned. And then after the special item, which is that's the change in the accounting estimate, is the change in the closure and post-closure cost that I just mentioned. So that increase, so you have the expense that was added to the books of the city of Lahana. So that gives you a change in net position of $41,000. Questions on sanitation? The last thing that I will mention is that we did provide you with a 5-year summary kind of historical trend analysis. I'm not going to go over it. These are warning trends that are set by the Office of the State Auditor. These are ratios set by the Office of the State Auditor. We just inputted the numbers for you so that you have them in front of you and you can take a look. One side has the ratios, the other side has the audited financial statement numbers. These come straight from the audited financial statements. Just kind of gives you an idea of the trends and where the city's funds have gone from 2020 through 2024. Any other questions for myself or even Patrick?
I just want to say thank you guys so much for doing this. I remember the first year I worked with you guys, and we weren't in this situation we're in right now. I'm not saying we're out of it yet, but we're all on the better side of it than we were in those first meetings. And when I look at everything that we're doing and what the direction we're headed, I thank you guys, because when you guys are sounding the alarm saying, hey, something needs to change here, it's up to these kind of boards, this board and utility board especially. I want to thank them for listening to that call and taking action. So thank you guys for pointing out these things, and we still got to get better, but I appreciate you guys bringing this to our attention so we can look at it.
Thank you. Yeah, and we thank you guys, and if there are any questions that come up later on, that first report that Patrick went over, our numbers are on there. Feel free to give us a call and we'll go into detail on more things that we do.
Absolutely. To council and to any utility board members, Patrick and Andrew are available. If you guys need more detail, if you need more questions answered, get with them and they'll schedule something up and you guys can go over that with them.
Yep, just let us know. Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you.
Joe, is it okay if I add something about the sewer?
Very quickly, Lisa.
As you saw, the sewer has $30.
Mike.
As you saw, the sewer has $30. The money that was borrowed from internal services has been returned, and you'll notice that if you look at the monthly financials. As soon as all of the sludge hauling machine is, or not sludge hauling, but the sludge press machine and all of that is completed, a bona fide loan will be put forth before this council from internal services to wastewater, just like we did with water. And hopefully after that, there'll be no more borrowing. We'll slowly pay that back because we'll have reduced our expenses and we have increased our rates. And I just wanted to give you an FYI that is coming, but I didn't want to do an official loan until after the new sludge press had been installed and functioning, so we knew the exact amount that we would need to bring sewer back up, and then hopefully keep it there and pay back that loan. Okay.
Thank you. All right, now it will be a fun time. Mrs. Harris and then Martin, if you want to come up too and follow up telling us that we want to start spending some money.
This actually might include Eliza as well, because this is one of the ordinances that Eliza writes, but I announce. This is an ordinance making supplemental appropriations to the sanitation fund for the calendar year of 2025.
Would you like your packet?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And then since we're doing Bob's rules now too, Martin, if you just want to explain what's going on here so everyone's aware.
Okay, so what you're about to discuss is a resolution, or not a resolution, but is it a resolution? For a budget amendment to the sanitation fund. So I guess I just really want to start off just to make sure that everybody understands that, again, the sanitation fund is an enterprise fund. It is not a general fund. So the money that is being asked for today for the budget amendment comes from the sanitation's retained earnings and is not coming from taxpayer money. I just want to make sure everybody understands that, not just you guys, but also everybody out there. So the money we're asking for, or I'm asking for, is to start a cardboard program. This is a program that I've seen work and I believe will be a good thing for the city in order to both divert cardboard waste to the landfill and for us to also be just environmentally conscious. So the price that's being asked for is $128,200. Again, that's going to be coming from sanitation's retained earnings. I believe those earnings were about $1.2 to $1.4 million, somewhere about in that range. This will cover the cost of about 200 containers to start the program. Basically, the program is going to be, we put out cardboard programs to our commercial customers, which we have about 450 commercial customers. I'm ordering 200 dumpsters because not every commercial business out there has probably enough cardboard to contribute to this kind of program, but there are going to be quite a few, especially the fast food places and and anybody that's a big cardboard producer. So essentially what's going to happen is they will order cardboard containers, which we're setting a rate, hopefully next utility board meeting, of about $25 to $30 a month. Eventually, and I anticipate if all 200 containers are being used, that this program will pay for itself in approximately 3 years, depending on what the rate that is set by the utility board. If the rate is $25 a month, it's about 3 years. If it's $35 a month, that can be as low as 2 years to recoup the cost of the containers. So what will happen is we already have a truck that would be designated for cardboard pickup. We would go out and pick up cardboard probably Mondays, Wednesdays, and possibly Fridays. And then this cardboard would be taken, once the truck is full, would be taken over to Clean Valley Recycling at no cost. So basically, again, we're diverting all cardboard waste to the landfill, which will decrease sanitation's cost to Oakley on a monthly basis. And then it will also, we are taking that cardboard for free to Clean Valley Recycling, no cost there other than just the transportation of it from here to their facility. Is there any questions on any of that?
So right now, the cardboard takes up a lot of space in the dumpsters, and then when it gets wet, when it gets, it becomes heavy, which increases our cost to the landfill.
Right, absolutely. And I think the big thing to understand is even if it takes us 3 to 4 years or maybe even a little bit longer to recoup the cost of the containers, we now have an additional revenue source going forward past that recoup time.
And you've partnered with Clean Valley, and they're
Yes.
on board with this,
Yep.
correct?
I'm also on that board and have discussed this very thing with them multiple times.
Have you done much outreach with the businesses that would be participating in those?
I haven't. I will as soon as, if you guys are past this budget amendment, that'll be one of the first things that we start doing is talking about that. I think really I want to make sure that we know the cost, which will be set by the utility board. And then there have been discussion on whether we should make this a mandatory thing, but I really think that, and I've seen it for myself, and I'll bring up Carl's Jr. as an example. They have, I think, 3 containers, and 1 or 2 of those are constantly filled with cardboard. So if you have 1 or 2 containers that they get now, they'll be able to decrease the number of other containers which cost more than our cardboard containers. They'll actually be decreasing the price that they pay for sanitation, and then we'll be taking that waste and putting it where it belongs instead of in the landfill.
I have to play devil's advocate. If we're doing that, would our sanitation revenue decrease because they're not using as many containers?
I mean, it could even out, especially if the containers stay the same. It's going to be relatively close. It could possibly decrease. It just depends on the waste. But you're right. That is a possibility.
But you've also decreased your Oakley cost.
Yeah.
Hopefully, in the end, it's a wash, and you recycled.
Yes.
Now, I just want to mention that, again, I've seen this program in place, obviously, from a community that I came from that I won't mention. And I've seen this. They've been doing it for decades. And it works. They bring their waste to Secra in Los Angeles, and it's a program that works. It's going to be a little rough in the beginning, I think, because people want to put incorrect waste in cardboard containers and things like that. But I think over time, matter of a year or 2, I'm sure it'll work the way it's intended.
Well, thank you. That's a great plan. And I'm starting to be a little more conscious about the environment. And so we have one across from the bank. And I found myself when I go to throw the cardboard or throw the trash, I walk over there. So I think it'll help everyone to be more mindful of that. Thank you.
Just curious, how many commercial customers in La Junta does Clean Valley Recycling already have? And will they just flip over to being like the existing ones?
This has been a discussion that I've had with them. Their service is more expensive than what our service would be. They're already going to be receiving all the cardboard plus any additional cardboard, which is probably going to be significant compared to what they're already doing. But either way, they're on board with it.
Yeah.
They support it. They think that they can remove their current containers and use them in other communities and other places.
I think a lot of, if I remember correctly, the containers that they received were through a grant, and they had benchmarks, so many containers. I think it was 20 one year, 30 the next year to get out in the community. So I agree. It seems like it'll be easy for them to relocate those outside of La Junta if there's commercial entities in La Junta that are currently using a Clean Valley container. That'll be great because then it frees it up for somebody else. They still get the cardboard. Everything's diverted from the landfills. So.
And I think our program will be a little bit more streamlined. We already have people on staff that will be able to handle this without increasing our staff. So, and we already have the equipment to do it. So all we need is just the containers, and we can do this honestly better than they're doing it, and they're still receiving the end product without having to hire people to go out and pick these containers up. We'll be doing it for them. But also for our community and for the sanitation fund.
Do you know what is the cost what does Clean Valley charge per month for commercial
I think they said it's $35 a month.
Okay, so it might even reduce it a little bit depending on what the utility board says. So.
Yeah, don't quote me on that. I just know that their price is more expensive than what we.
It's been a couple of years, but I think it's 35. It might be a little bit more. I'm not going to say for sure.
And they
I know
did say
some places had more than one pickup a week. Like it depended.
And we can do that. We can accommodate that.
Which is awesome.
And then they also did mention that their containers are just a pain to deal with. We're talking open containers with lids on them. And then we just pick them up just like we do our other trash dumpsters. So, and we already have trucks to be able to handle that. So.
And do you have to order all 200 of the
Well, I'm hoping that we'll
receptacles?
have more than 200 is my goal.
But 200 is
200
the
to
initial
start.
purchase?
200, yeah, I went with 200 because I figured that's less than half of our commercial, our commercial businesses. So I really felt like 200 was a good number to start with.
Okay.
But that can be changed.
Chandra, I'll also add that when it comes to dumpsters, and I think Martin will back me up on this, is generally the more you buy, the cheaper it is. If you buy 2, they charge you more than if you buy 5. And that's also one of the benefits of ordering more in the startup than to just say, oh, well, let's just order a couple and see how it goes. In the end, we're going to pay more than if we just say, you know what, this is our program and we're going to do it.
Just real quick, when we talk about Clean Valley and what they're going to be doing, maybe doing, do you want, the utility board does, but do you want to talk about SECRA real quick and what's going on with them?
So I'm also on SECRA's board, which is something that is required by my position. Right now, they're kind of are in dire straits financially. They're looking at possibilities, and one of those possibilities would be to pick up and call it done. So if that is to happen, they've reached out to another organization. I think it's CECD is on the Front Range. They've talked about the possibility of handing over the reins to them, and they would still furnish the same kind of service that we already get as far as our containers over on Adams and a few other spots throughout town. They would be able to hopefully accommodate the same kind of service with those same containers for the community. It may change. We're not exactly sure how that will look exactly, but there is, I'm really trying to make sure that what we offer to our community stays the same. So, of course, I'm on that board to represent La Junta and our community, but if I've also had talks with Clean Valley, and have told them that if there was some way they might be able to provide that same kind of service, that we would obviously look at handing that over to them versus a new company out of the Front Range. But they would have to provide the exact same service or close to it. Otherwise, making that service any lesser than what it already is would be a disservice to our community. So there have been a bunch of talks back and forth with both SECRA and Clean Valley just to make sure that we make sure that our service is maintained.
Any other questions from Martin? All right, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance making a supplemental appropriation to the sanitation fund for the calendar year 2025.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Lisa asked if I like my packet. I just want to say, and I think it's important, when there is a request for supplemental appropriation, we were given, Martin gave us a letter. There were bids from several companies and a justification for why it was important. And I just really appreciate it. It helps us answer questions, and thank you for giving a thorough presentation. I do appreciate it.
And he was here. In addition to the packet, he was here too. So thank you, Martin. All right, I'll ask for your vote. And that passes unanimously. Committee and board reports.
From the hospital board, we had a great combined meeting dinner last week. And just for the public's information, and this is public information, and new interim CEO, Mr. Gene Miller, is here. He'll be working hand in hand with Heidi Gerhardt and the senior leadership staff of the hospital during this period of transition. So.
Yes, we had a really good joint meeting with the hospital. I'm excited to see what they have coming in their search and then how we can work together better. I think myself and Councilwoman Pantoja are working with Mrs. Ratzliff on a couple of projects that hopefully we can share more news with you soon too. So.
Also to watch out for their fundraiser that they have coming up.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Any other committee and board reports? City manager comments. So, Brock, you can take off the property management hat and put on the city manager hat.
Okay. Wasn't a lot to report, but Tom wanted to let everybody know that they'll continue to work on the main replacement 6 in Colorado and hope to have a new valve on Colorado by this week. He also said that WFI is in town to clean and cut with the clean cut and camera program on the sanitary sewer collection lines. They are working in the areas of the brewery and Lewis Bolt anchor plant and a couple of other areas of concern within the city. And he also wanted to let everybody know that the water department is putting final touches on a treatment alternative engineer report on how the city in the future might treat for emerging contaminants such as PFAS or PFASs, manganese, lithium, and others. On May 20th, we didn't open for bid, but we put out that we were going to try and replace the tennis courts at City Park. All bids must be turned in by June 24th. There's been quite a bit of interest in that one. Electric department stated that they started their annual tree trimming around the power lines. And pool opened on Friday, and on Parks and Rec side, restrooms at all city parks are closed indefinitely due to vandalism.
That's a tough one. So just so everyone knows the timeline, Brock, we had them vandalized prior to graduation weekend, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it really kind of started this winter, but that was more, we felt like it was people were breaking in for a place to stay. But then, yeah, around graduation, we got hit pretty hard, and then closed them, decided to open them back up for graduation weekend, and they got hit again. And so we closed them down, and they were broke into and absolutely destroyed, especially the men's bathroom at City Park. So they're closed indefinitely. We came in and had a welder come in and pretty much close them down. We started to get a little bit of vandalism at College Overlook. Do kind of feel at this point that it's personal, and I mean I've seen the Facebook comments. Our cameras are functioning. During that one period of time where it really got torn up, there were 45 people that went into that bathroom. So being able to tell which one it is, I mean, I might take a good guess on it based on how they entered the bathroom, but we can't tell you who's doing it. So until we can kind of figure something out where we can ensure that that they're not going to get, this isn't like graffiti. This is like ripping partitions off the walls, breaking toilets, ripping the sinks out of the countertops. I mean, it was pretty good stuff.
Has a police report been filed?
On all of them, yes, they have been.
And, because they do know who some of them are.
Yeah, we did actually catch, we caught 7 people trespassing, and we did go ahead and trespass them because they went in after it was locked. They found a way in. And they do have all the video surveillance that we have, and they're looking into it, but it's going
And
to be
that was
really
the previous time. So then this happened again after that, which had over 45 people. We cannot have cameras inside the bathroom, just so everyone is clear on that. We can only have them outside. They are checked daily. So it's not like they were going a couple days without being checked and we don't know. But in a 24-hour period, 45 plus people were in and out of that bathroom, and at some point that happened, correct?
That was like, I think they came in and checked them at noon, and then the following morning at like 7 o'clock in the morning is when they found it. And here's the thing too, and we kind of talked about this, like if people see it, like let us know. I mean, that kind of narrows that timeline down on who's been there. But we spent a ton of money getting those restrooms restored. I mean, it was conservation trust money or outdoor conservation. Anyway, and now they're locked up. And then the next thing you worry about is, because I do feel like it's somewhat personal, is what are they going to move to next? So if anybody sees anything, let us know. The sooner we can close down that window of when people are going in and out of there. I don't know when we'll reopen them. I mean, the men's bathroom will probably be thousands of dollars to repair.
Well, I think one thing is that the point needs to be made, and so I'm hoping that the police department can narrow it down to who some of these people that are doing it, and if they're juveniles, well, I'm sorry, that goes back on your parents.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Brock, can you give them an idea the amount of money that was spent to get those restrooms back?
I mean, my part of it, which started in like 2020, I mean, there was a bunch of stuff that they did. There was some mud jacking and some sewer replacement, but I'm going to guess probably in the range of $150,000 to $160,000 was put into those. Might be more. I'm just going off of what Brad had told me before I started, and knowing what we put into it in 2020, I think.
That's a long process.
Yeah, and it took about, because we were kind of doing it as we had funds. So it was a good probably year and a half, 2 years that it took to get it completed.
And if I recall right, the bathrooms on 12th Street in the middle of the park were also closed due to vandalism, correct?
Yes. And they actually got to the point where we had people that would refuse to come pump them because they're kind of like an outhouse kind of thing because of the things that they were having to pull out of it.
So do you want to talk about right now? We're going to have porta potties at the parks, correct?
Yes, and it took a little while to figure out because the company that we had doing it before, they sold out. So we were kind of getting bids on who was going to be the cheapest because there is quite a cost. But we currently have 2 porta potties at City Park. There'll be 2 at Brick and Tile, 1 at Livewell for the plays in the park this summer, and one at Tippy. So, but that's at a cost of $120 a month per porta potty.
Can they secure them so they can't tip them?
They're supposed to, yes. I will say this: they will find a way, though. I mean, it's just you can't foolproof everything.
Have we ever prosecuted anybody in your time here for vandalism? Because I'm starting to question even the cameras. We're spending money on cameras, and
Yes.
there's no.
We prosecuted on a vandalism at the skate park, and we went pretty hard on that one. Obviously, we trespassed those kids the other day. I know when I kind of learned early on that it doesn't pay off to be very nice when it comes to these things. So anytime we've had the opportunity to prosecute somebody on something, we have.
And then civil, can we go out whether it's parents or guardians? I think that's a venue we need to go.
I think me and Mrs. Harris learned very recently that UPS work can only be done by minors. Is that correct?
Well, in the city of La Junta, in the state of things when I arrived here last year, Cassie Sanchez and Judge Manley were only doing UPS for juvenile offenders. none of that is a rule that's Colorado-wide. UPS is still used by the county court for any age, but UPS here in the city of La Junta is only used for juveniles at this time.
What about, no, I'm talking about civil penalties to go after. I don't care if we have to go after their homeowner's insurance or whatever.
Sure.
To start recouping money lost.
I was just asking what UPS stands for.
Oh, I'm
It's
so
called
sorry.
Public Service.
Yeah, no, it's not the mail order company. I should have fixed that. But are you asking if you could sue civilly? I mean, you can. You'd have to. Your standard is different. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt, and the likelihood of seeing something like that happen would be remote. But I suppose if it's something you were interested in, and if we already had some other sense of evidence so that it was motivated by at least a colorable claim that we knew who it was, we could look at it.
Sorry we got off onto a toilet issue there, but do you have any other questions for Brock and his city manager?
It was just disappointing to see.
It was. And hopefully someone has knowledge of it and can give us some information that we desperately need right now. Because we want to have those open. We don't want to spend that money for them not to be usable. So if anyone has information and we can get this figured out and we can stop this or come up with a plan for us to stop this, then we want to open those back up.
It's not a good look, and I mean, we do take a considerable amount of complaints on porta potties in the bathrooms. They're not ideal, but yeah, I would love to find out a way to be able to open those back up without fear of them being vandalized.
Not toilet related. Quick question. Are there any grants that we've received to support redoing the tennis courts?
We tried about 6 times over the last 2 years to get grants on tennis courts and had no luck.
So we're going out alone?
Well, what we're going to do at this point is we're going to move forward with the bid process.
Okay.
And depending on where those bids come in at, we would hope that we'd have enough to back it up with conservation trust money, and in the meantime try and continue to go after grants. But they're not lending on tennis courts. They're kind of a hard one. GoCo's they're kind of lending money differently now, and we went with the Historic Society quite a bit, and that they'd never done that before, and so we're going to just move forward with conservation trust money.
Do you want to talk briefly about how conservation trust, and we could either build new, which we don't want to do, or improve what we currently have? So that's we're trying to get that done.
I mean, conservation trust money, we get it quarterly, and it's anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000.
20 to 25.
20 to 25. It comes from the Colorado Lottery, and what we have in the past always used it for was matches on grants, and which is nice. I mean, I think I feel like this department's at a point where I don't think we need anything new at this point, because in hopes that we could maintain it. Have a little trouble maintaining what we've got right now. But you can use conservation trust money on anything really outdoors, and so we've always just kind of just had a big lump sum in there. I'd actually prefer to, other than this that we're talking about right now, but moving in the future, use it for little quick hitters, some stuff that was maybe on our master plan that wouldn't cost very much, to just try and get some things that aren't necessarily a big ticket item, but it's something that's an eyesore that needs to be repaired. But I know that for years the tennis courts at City Park have been, they haven't looked good. And the idea is, and of course, is to turn it into a tennis pickleball hybrid, which is, pickleball's pretty big right now, so.
Have you received any bids?
They have to be in by the 20th. So.
Have you received any?
No, we haven't received any. We've had a lot of questions. They've had a lot of questions. I would say, if I remember correctly, we've had at least 8 to 10 people come back and ask questions about it. And there was multiple companies available that could do it, that it was sent out to, that Jen sent out to on BidNet.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to governing body comments. And you all should have a rules of ethics. So this is another one, when you start digging, you get really, really into the weeds. So Mrs. Harris, if you want to just briefly explain why we're going to try it this way and then have more council input rather than just adopting what we initially had thought about doing.
Sure. So initially we talked about how there was only, in 2010, statewide, and I was going to try to find the tab, it has this here. In 2010, statewide, there was an amendment to the Colorado Constitution bringing in ethics in government. And in response to doing that, the city here adopted some part of a ethics set of rules. But what I should have explained 2 weeks ago and didn't is that when we are a home rule city, this is the fundamental problem. As a home rule city, generally we're allowed to make rules for ourselves, except at times when the state decides that they still want to intervene. So initially, the case law made it appear that so long as local governments all adopted the one part of the ethics code that we did adopt, which is a no gifts rule. Everybody, home rule or not, had to have a no gifts rule. But there was a case that started in 2020, but was still getting attention as late by CML as late as the fall of 23. This case was a home rule city who said they were not subject to the Independent Ethics Commission, which was established in the Colorado Constitution Amendment. That's the second part. It had ethics in government requirements of how to behave and then how to administer that program statewide for those cities that were statutory cities. For those of us who were home rule, it stated that so long as we had adequate statutes of our own, that we would be bypassed by it. But then this 2020 case that got attention and continued to get attention began to say that it was not enough to have the no gifts ordinance. Every home rule city also had to have some means of independent oversight to be sure that ethics rules are being followed. And if the home rule city did not have that, we would fall under the Independent Ethics Commission as well. So the recommendation that CML made is that everybody who is a home rule city should consider whether they want to adopt some kind of ethics board or third separate ethics review opportunity besides just saying that the council reviews it, because it had to be sufficiently independent was the language that the case used. So the reason I bring this to your attention is that if we're going to be talking about compliance at all, and some of our, you might remember as recently as last October, we talked about having a separate oversight board for building code things, and since then we've talked about needing to have additional appeals opportunities with boards, whether it was the Merit Appeals Board regarding employment or whether it had to do with getting rid of the Board of Adjustment and having the Planning Commission do that. So in connection with all of that, anytime you have a quasi-judicial behavior, that means a board that makes decisions and they're final. If you're doing that, you also have to be able to make sure that you have your ethics stuff in place. And if, as a home rule city, if we don't want to be kind of swallowed up by Colorado statutes statewide and the Independent Ethics Board, if you're not familiar with that, I can give you some material before the next meeting. I didn't want to overwhelm you too much, but if we wanted to do it differently and remain with more local control, we would need to decide how we wanted to do that. Generally, people have their own ethics board that they make, or many other towns use an example of having one particular arbitrating agent, the one ethics commissioner, maybe, named, who makes those decisions. So it doesn't have to be a board, but it has to be something that the words in the statute are, or in the words in the case law are that it needs to be sufficiently independent, whatever that means to anyone. In the range of things that I've seen for home rule cities, larger cities like Denver and Colorado Springs develop their own ethics commission. It's just city-based instead of statewide. Other towns that are either smaller or wish for a smaller level of government, even as large as the city of Longmont, uses an independent arbitrator, but it's one person rather than a whole commission. But if we're going to be talking about how we handle ethics and any of those decisions within the city, we will also want to address whether we have in place all that we need as a home rule entity, because home rule can be wonderful. We get to make our own rules, but it means we do have to go to the effort to do that. Otherwise, we're met with a vacuum, or the state will come in and tell us, because if we don't have it in place, the independent ethics board at the state level would make those decisions instead.
Yeah, so this all started with us wanting to look at conflict of interest, and then Aaron called me and we spent a couple of hours on the phone going over all the other stuff. So when you don't want to do something, get with a lawyer and they will tell
That's
you
right.
how.
I'll just
how
ruin
not-
it for you.
Not
You
to,
got it.
to go about that. Or they will explain to you how you can work through this. And she said, what do we do? I said, well, I think we just handle it one step at a time and bring it to council and see how we want to go forward with something like this. So she did also include a sample of a conflict of interest, correct?
A conflict of interest form
Yes.
that we could use. And really what I did there is I tried to put together something, but I tried also not to put in too many specifics, because even things like where to turn it in, if we haven't built that system yet, I can't tell you by writing it out where one should turn it in, because we don't have that administrative body in place. But the reason that disclosures can be important is that in all of the ethics rules that we see, if someone has made a disclosure concerning what is going on within their lives, at the state level, making that disclosure is protection against accusations or other kinds of circumstances that develop along the way. If you've made that disclosure and you've made it known to everybody in the group has the opportunity at that time to bring up an objection, and later that you've waived that opportunity because it's been made known and you had the chance to look at it. It's a way of trying to quiet down the idea of a constant pressure of arguing that someone has an issue or whatever it is, by saying, okay, have we disclosed it? Have we looked at it? Has everybody acknowledged that this is a thing? How do we want to go forward? And then we can put it to rest. Because that was the goal, I thought, if we were going to be trying to look at ethics at all, it would be how do we make sure that we've been as open as possible so that we can move past accusations of impropriety when in fact we're doing our best to comply.
And this should be something, in my opinion, and Aaron, you can weigh in a little bit, on quasi-judicial.
Right. Yeah, and I should have brought that up as well. One of the main things with a small town that can be so difficult in a quasi-judicial, and quasi-judicial just means sort of like court. We'll call it like that. That sounds okay, right? In a quasi-judicial role, either that the council plays or that any other commission, planning commission, has this opportunity a lot because of the way that the new Title 17 zoning code is drafted. But in a small town, you might be shopping for broccoli at Walmart, and someone might come up and say, hey, what about that thing that is going on in town? And it seems as though we could provide better protections for those who are providing services for us by giving everybody a little bit of understanding of how that should be handled, so that something improper isn't done out of accident and then brought up as something of a dishonest later. Because we obviously don't want that, but we also live in a small place where everyone, we aim as all of you, whether you're having your gatherings for your ward and trying to be accessible to people, you do aim to be available. And yet once we start really emphasizing decisions that the council makes or that boards make, we want to be able to give you some guidelines about how to shut down conversations that are outside of the meeting itself. Does that make sense? I'd be glad to answer questions about that if we have to, but I'm hoping that as we develop this, that it will become clear what I mean. I think one of the hardest things for all of you when you're trying to serve the public is when someone approaches you and says, can you fix this for me? And of course, you want to be as helpful as possible, but you may also need a structure to fall back on or talking points to fall back on so that you understand what the rules are or what the agreed upon circumstance is here among council members or other people who are serving.
And I just think for the city of Wanda, I think we've been living a little bit dangerously by not having this done right now. Knock on wood, nothing bad's happened, but the longer we go without having something like this, it could be trouble for a lot of us.
One thing that Joe and I talked about specifically, that those in the public who were familiar with the word censure and how it might have been used in the past within the context of the La Junta City Council, adopting a rule that explains what censure means, it would be incredibly helpful or illuminating if we are asking. If we remember the example where a censure was used before, I remember watching the meetings and Mr. Maloff was asked repeatedly to explain what it meant to adopt a decision for censure. But that could be clarified if we just wrote it into the rules instead of having to look it up and find out what it means in other places.
So I definitely don't want a motion, I don't want anything like that, but I want you guys to start looking at this and seeing what way we would like to go forward on something, if we even want to go forward. I'll open a discussion on that if you guys
One
want.
more quick thing on that. Last time we were together, I explained that I thought the fastest thing would be to just adopt what the state uses. Let me make sure that I explain why that doesn't work. The law has changed and interpretations have changed since 2010 when the state made their rules. The other thing, though, that's notable is we were required to adopt the no gifting rule, which in the code itself is 104, but 109 at the state level deals all with local level governance. And for whatever reason, in 2010, we didn't adopt that one. So I might direct your attention, and I think it's in the packet, to look at 109, because that's the one that appears to be directly related to local government, and we don't use it, for what that's worth.
Any discussion right now?
Just a question. Who prepared the materials that we had in our packet today?
For this
Yeah.
discussion?
Are you looking at the... Do you mean the memo?
Yeah, well, it just starts question page 1.
Yeah, I wrote that.
Okay.
Now, would this pertain to all boards or just city council?
It would still be up to you, but it could be all boards. You would have to specifically carve out those that it did not pertain to, because otherwise I don't understand how we would distinguish some from others.
Sure, I agree with that. All boards should be subject to this.
Curious if, I think putting in place anything, we need to do the whole thing at once. And thanks, Brock. Knowing what we're doing as far as if it's an ethics board, an ethics person, so I'm curious to know what other municipalities similar to us have done and kind of exactly what that process looks like for them.
I could cut out a few and just send them by email if you'd like. Certainly, I have not looked at examples of any cities that are 7,000 people. I looked at larger cities because I was trying to look for municipalities who may have had reason to be motivated to make these decisions. we could certainly look at the differences between those cities that chose an ethics board versus unifying it more into one person.
Just seems that doing it all together makes sense.
Yeah.
So more information on that.
So like examples of like
Yeah.
okay, sure.
How other places do it, and also the information about operationalizing it. If it's like who the information goes to, how it's disseminated, does it get posted on the website, or just how the information is made public, how the information is shared with us. Because like you said, a big part of it is disclosure to give a heads up for future business.
And that's actually why it was odd to me reviewing it that 109 was not adopted. At the state level, 109 is the closest that we have to giving a administrative example, like how is this done? But you're right, that is the difficult piece is just what does the process look like?
One of the boards I sit on required to sign on once a year.
Is there a consensus that we want to move forward looking at this?
I do. More information, yeah.
Okay. We'll work on it for the next meeting. Thank you, Aaron. And then I'll start governing body comments, and then you guys can go after if you have some. But you may have noticed that there is not a AVIS ordinance on this one. Chief Quick did get some more information as to what Councilman Stoker had asked. We got brand new information, and rather than have him come here when we still didn't have all the information, we're going to wait till we get a lot more on that. But I want to be clear that, and there was some talk, and I did talk to some people that said, well, if we pass this, that Chief Quick would be able to utilize that system. Now, Ms. Harris, not all communities consider the LiDAR gun AVIS, and if he wanted to, Chief Quick could actually start doing this now, correct? With this company.
Yeah, there are three different things going on there, but because Paul, Mr. Councilman Velasquez has asked me that before. Are we talking about okaying the use of LiDAR? No, of course not. You can do it anytime.
The scanning
That's right.
capabilities of the plate.
Yeah. The scanning thing is separate from that. What may be part of AVIS is start to finish not having any contact with the driver. So even if you use the gun, it creates a ticket, you review the ticket, or you talk to the driver, any part of that would make it different than what the AVIS statute requires.
But what I was getting at is, if Chief Quick wanted to, he could do that. He does not want to do that. He has no intention of doing that. I spoke with him. He said that is not his intention. He wants to work with council. He had been asked to look at ways to stop speeding in the city of La Junta. And I'm going to send these out in an email, but he gave me some stats. I'll send it to Mel. January 1, 2025 through May 31st of 2025. We had 721 traffic contacts, 1 DUI, 82 citations, and 119 traffic accidents. In the same time frame in January 1, 24 to May 31st, 24, we had 458 traffic stops, 117 accidents, 121 citations, 1 DUI. So far this year, we have had 10,382 calls for service. In 2024, during that same period of time, we had 6,723 calls for service. So they are very busy. I'm not saying that they don't have time for this. That they're looking for creative ways. The first way was the speed trailer. Now we're looking at the guns. We're trying to get more information on those. But no one is trying to pass anything without this council's knowledge or things. Chief Quick will be here as soon as he has all the information needed for you guys. But that's where we're at right now on the AVIS system. So I didn't want you guys to think that it just got taken away. I want to make sure that we have all the information so we can answer. I also want Mr. Hart to be here to help out with that conversation as well. But I'll get that to Melanie for to email those numbers out to you guys. And then the other one, real quick, Maureen, if I remember correctly, CML, I think you're kind of right, because we have had, and some of my fellow council members remember the difficult CAT conversations, where they were allowed to speak about the CAT ordinance when it was on the agenda. So I think that it should not say for non-agenda items only. I think that they should be allowed to use their citizen participation to talk about agenda items, but I also think that it should just be for that time, because if I remember right from some of my CML meetings, the meetings can then get derailed. And if someone brings up something outside of what is on the agenda, then we could face legal challenges for sunshine, open meetings violation. So in order not to open up that, I would think that we would keep it as it is, so we're more of the decision makers instead of playing, oh, don't say that. You never want to restrict someone's speech either. So if they start going on about something that's not here, you don't want to stop them, because then they can say that you're not letting them talk about what they want to talk about. So I think giving them 5 minutes, I do know that 5 minutes is generous compared to a lot of other municipalities. Some of them only do 3, some of them only do 1. So imagine trying to get through a list of stuff you want to do with 1 minute to spare there. I think Councilman Ramirez said it really good the last time, and I want to reiterate, that is your time to speak. So if you don't want to be interrupted, if you do interrupt them, they get more time to go on, because you're then asking them a question. And that usually is just one side of the story. I'm not saying it's the only side, but there's usually more to that. So it should be on our city manager, today is you, Brock, to then follow up and see if that's something that we can, as a council, handle, or if that's something that management needs to handle. I watched that last meeting I was telling Mel, and a lot of those, you could go see Martin in engineering from Monday through Friday. Or is it Friday now, Martin, or are you off Friday? Half day on Friday, and get those answered. One of my fellow members on the Urban Renewal Board was like, sometimes it's like youth sports, and sometimes something happens with your kid and you want to go to the school board. Maybe you got to go to the coach first, and after the coach you go to the principal, then the AD, and then if you're not getting what you want, then go to school board. We're kind of like the school board, and sometimes people want to go straight to the board instead of talking to the coach or the AD or the principal. So that's where I'm at on it. If you think that we should do something else, you guys are more than welcome to give me that feedback, but that's what I remember from my CML stuff.
Maybe you could just add on that citizen participation for both non-agenda and...
I would be open to that.
So then it just covers all bases. And
Or just say citizen participation, 5-minute time limit per person.
Yeah.
To me, that makes it the most simplified. And I did just have a conversation with Tom Hibbs. Apparently, he's the reason we have the 5-minute rule.
I believe that.
And I told him I was going to call him out on it. I guess he came in and talked for an hour once, and then the next city council meeting, guess what? We implemented a 5-minute rule. So,
wow.
Tom, anyway, I appreciate people who line up their ducks, and I know it takes a lot to come here. So I appreciate citizen participation, and I think making it more inclusive is better. So thank you for hearing me out on that.
And I just want to say too, we also, after one of those difficult meetings, people thought that you get 5 minutes, and if you didn't use it but you showed up, you could then donate your 5 minutes to somebody else. We don't do that anymore either. It's just 5 minutes per person. You can't donate that time. So just FYI, that came at one of the meetings too. So so Tom's not the only one getting called out on that.
When I worked for Denver City Council, that you could put together, I think it was like a 1 or 2 minute, and you could put together like 20 people would come together and designate one speaker and like give their time to one speaker. So yeah, that is a thing.
Ours is per person, just in case anyone wants to answer.
Yeah.
All right. Any other governing body comments?
In addition to kind of that conversation, just wondering, I think we've had kind of a complete shift in leadership and where we are in the city, and I'm you have to play the role of Michael Hart, but we have a new city attorney, a new city manager. I think decades and decades of experience has left our city, and I think that we haven't figured out as a council how to do some things. And I think I still have a lot of questions. I had the question about citizen participation, but I think we still don't, I would like to have an agenda with more than 8 to 12 working or business hours to look over things and ask questions. I mean, the audit was 111 pages, and it was a lot to get through and be, I think, well prepared. And I just think that as the 7 of us, we could have some conversations about how we do our business. And I think the ethics conversation perfectly blends into that. I think there's a lot of questions about communication. I think that we don't do email well. I don't think we communicate well. I think when somebody has something that they want to send out to everybody, I think we don't know how to do it. I don't think we do it right. I don't think that when there's information that should be shared with everybody, whether it's about things that are happening at the hospital or what's happened at the cemetery, we don't do a good job of lining ourselves up to be able to answer questions and be good leaders for our community. And I think now is the perfect time for us to have a work session where we say, okay, how do we want to do business? And I appreciated Michael Hart sending out his chain of command memo that he suggested, and I couldn't agree more. And when we have conversations about how the city is doing business, I think we have 7 different perspectives on how that should be done, and I think we should get on the same page, and I think we should do it in public. So I'd like to request that we have a work session to discuss how the city council does business with our new city manager and our new city attorney.
We could definitely look at doing a work session like that. We have a lot coming up. Pam Denny, he has a work session coming up about economic development and all of that. That's coming up at the end of this month, June 30th. We still need to schedule a tour for buses too, for property management, not buses, a tour for property management. I also wanted to do some tours of just the regular departments like electric and wastewater, water, stuff like that. So I'm all for it if we can make the time work, and we'll have to find some dates that work and just go through that. I would just include that, with the hospital, that's a very tough, a tough slope on what we're going to be doing. We're going to be working with the new interim and then going forward, whoever they select, and as well as Paul, to just make sure, and I made sure I said that we need to get better at sharing information between the two groups. So there's a lot that council can do, and there's a lot that council can't do, and I think there's unfair expectations out there of what power this group has. And really, the 2 people sitting on the ends are 2 of the only people that we can actually talk to about certain things. And when you talk about sending out information, once again, we're talking about open meetings law and sunshine. So if we're all on the email and we're all sending that out, it doesn't mean that everyone is going to be a violation, but I like to err on the side of not even putting myself in that situation. So I'll send everything to Mal and or Mr. Hart. So I'm not sending that all to you guys to where you get the chance to reply back to me, and then we end up, in my first 2 years, we were under open laws and sunshine like every other week, and it got to where I did not want to even be in that ball game anymore. So that's why I send out information the way I do. When it comes to you guys, I'm not saying you can't, but I just err on not doing it that way.
Well, we had a perfect example at the last meeting of you had a conversation with our police chief directly. The police chief gave you information back directly, and then it didn't get to the rest of us for 2 weeks. And it was information that would have been great for the rest of us to have. So there has to be a better way to get those kind of conversations out to all of us. And just now, you clearly have had many conversations with Chief Quick about traffic and speeding. And again, I think those conversations need to happen either with the police chief to the city manager or to all 7 of us at the same time.
So how that works out with those interactions with the police chief, I have asked Michael Hart these questions, and he will either direct me to the police chief, he'll direct me to our Parks and Rec person, he'll direct me to sanitation if he doesn't have a readily available answer. Okay, you guys can also do that if you do that through Michael Hart.
I've done that too.
Okay.
And the public can as well.
Yes.
So, again, when you were talking about the youth sports and your child, and you want to go straight to the school board because your child didn't get to play, these people are paid employees. They're the head of their departments. If anybody in the public has a question about the cemetery, the swimming pool, the streets, they can go to them too. It's not just up to us.
Agreed, 100%. I'm so glad you stated it that way, Chandra. I'm glad we're on the same page.
And that's where we differ from the citizens or our constituents, is before we can go to Martin or Brock, we have to have permission from Michael Hart to speak to them. They do not. So before I go talk to Chief Quick, and I've established this, I ask Michael Hart, and that's in our charter, we have to have permission from the city manager to speak to an employee, and I limit those conversations just to department heads. I would never approach a city employee that's out there doing their job and interrupt their time, because Martin has certain expectation of his employees, as does Brock, that they don't need a city council person interrupting them. And I know that's not what you're saying, but that's where the constituency has ultimate free range, and we do not. I don't know if that is in the same ballpark or not.
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm getting, I feel like this is a conversation we all need to have about how we all interact. I understand open records. I understand how to send communications. I'm just saying that the way we're doing things right now, I don't think is getting great results, and I don't think we're being consistent across the 7 of us. And we should have a conversation about it in the future.
I think like when we come to city council, we don't have a handbook how to do everything, and I didn't when I started, and so I've been on here for 4 years, and I've resolved a lot of issues that constituents have come to me and in the background. If there's something that I do think like it does need to be addressed and it's not getting resolved, I do mention it at the city council meetings, but that's always been how I've handled it, just to be more efficient in our time here. Like they said, Tom Hibbs talked for an hour. We could be here all night.
Anything else? All right, I'll adjourn us. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Just real quick before we all step off, if you have something you want to talk to council about, please let them gather their belongings, and they will be down on the bottom to talk with you after the meeting. If not, have a good night. Thank you.